What's going on, everyone? Hope you're having a great day. In today's video, we'll be ranking the vehicles in Twisted Metal 1 within a tier list. The characters within each tier are ordered, but I believe that characters within the same tier have largely similar levels of effectiveness and could be interchanged depending on personal playstyles, preferences, or situations. I'm sure many of you will have opinions that differ from mine, and I would love to read about them in the comment section below. With all that out of the way, let's get started at the bottom of the list. Unfortunately, beginning my list at the bottom in its one and only appearance in the series, we have Pit Viper. Pit Viper is pretty poor handling, meaning you slide around turns a lot more than other characters, and that really just isn't what I expect from a character like this. The special weapon has you fire a slime-looking projectile in a straight line, then it leaves a little trail of fire on the ground where it made impact. The problem with this special is it just doesn't really do that much damage. Plus the fire trail it adds to the ground is hardly ever useful, at least from my experience, since it's so small, doesn't do much damage, and enemies just drive out of it. On top of all of this, Pit Viper just doesn't have a lot of armor to survive hits with. All of these factors unfortunately have Pit Viper taking the bottom spot in my rankings. Up next in the C tier we have Yellow Jacket. His stats are overall pretty balanced, but it's brought down by a special attack that just doesn't do as much as you hope it would. The special is very similar to Pit Viper's, where Yellow Jacket shoots out a Molotov cocktail at enemies in a straight line, and upon hitting enemies, it does a lacking amount of damage overall, and leaves a tiny spot of fire on the ground that does damage to those who stay on top of it. On top of this, Yellow Jacket's armor is middling, so you can only take so many hits before needing to retreat for health. Honestly, Yellow Jacket just feels a bit underwhelming. You just keep thinking there are better choices, which is a sentiment that holds true for all the characters in the C tier. Not to say they're bad characters, just unfortunately the most underwhelming of the bunch. The final entrant in the C tier is Outlaw. Its stats are pretty balanced overall, but it's brought down by a lackluster special weapon. The classic taser special weapon just isn't the greatest in this game. It doesn't do as much damage as you would like, and you have to be pretty close to enemies in order to get any use out of it, which can be dangerous to do in certain situations. You sometimes have to make quite a big risk using the special, and the reward just isn't worth it most of the time. However, I still think that this special can get more mileage than the ones that came before it on my list, and that's the main factor that has Outlaw at the top of C tier. Beginning the B tier, we have Hammerhead. The B tier is where we start to get vehicles that have clear strengths that can really be played to. Hammerhead's biggest strength is its hulking armor stat paired with its aggressive melee playstyle. The special attack comes out automatically upon ramming into an opponent and massively increases the ramming damage dealt to the enemy. The obvious downside to Hammerhead is the slower speed and clunkier handling, which can definitely be annoying and can sometimes lead to issues during the heat of battle. However, Hammerhead is certainly a serviceable vehicle and a good choice for a playthrough of the game. Following Hammerhead in the B tier is Thumper. I consider Thumper to be a very middle-of-the-road character in this game for several reasons. The first being his stats, which are decent all around. His special attack shoots flames from the front of the vehicle to do a significant amount of damage. The issue with the special is its short range and lack of versatility. You need to be facing directly at an opponent and also be very close to them in order for the special to land at all, and you have to stay like that for a few seconds for the full attack to hit. While the damage it does is absurd if you can manage to land the full attack, it can just be unreliable and inconsistent to get the full value out of. Freeze missiles certainly help, but being reliant on them just further leads to the inconsistency problem, as you won't always have freeze missiles ready. Overall, while Thumper can be a great choice, he just isn't as versatile as some of the higher tier characters in this game. Finishing off the B tier, we have Spectre. Spectre is a character that has a very high speed stat but low armor to balance it out. His signature special weapon is the Phantom Burst missile that will track enemies relentlessly to reach them, and is really helped out in this game by the lack of the input commands, namely the shield command. Enemies can't just throw up a shield once they have the missile targeting them, meaning it outputs damage consistently. Spectre really embodies that camper playstyle, just running away and taking shots at enemies from a safe range, which can be really satisfying to do. The one thing that really brings Spectre down is the abysmal armor stat, meaning if you get caught in a bad situation, you can likely kiss one of your lives away. Still, Spectre is a very solid character and a good choice for a playthrough of the game. Beginning the cast of A tier characters in my list is Darkside. A tier characters have multiple strengths that can be utilized and only some small downsides. Darkside has an enormous armor stat, but the rest of its stats are nothing to write home about. The special attack has Darkside fire a thin white beam in front of it, which doesn't really do all that much damage. The real strengths of Darkside are the insane durability and incredible ramming damage. If you can manage to turbo into an enemy just right, you can do massive amounts of damage, similar to or even more than a Hammerhead with its special attack. This pairs nicely with the fantastic armor stat, letting you scrap it out for much longer before needing to get health. You don't really need to have weapons as Darkside. You can rely on ramming opponents much of the time to get the job done. These factors are what I believe bring Darkside into the A tier. Following Darkside in the A tier and beginning the top 5 is Crimson Fury. This is a vehicle that is incredibly fast, has a good special weapon, but low armor. The best thing about Crimson Fury is the high speed stat and fast special weapon recharge rate. The special weapon fires out a thin beam in front of the vehicle and does decent damage. The weapon is pretty precise to use, but not too hard to land hits with. The special isn't really that great or anything on its own, but it does recharge fairly quickly, allowing you to use it more often. Being this fast in this game makes it pretty easy to maneuver around enemies and take fewer hits, which can lead to you surviving quite a long time as this character. These factors are why I think Crimson Fury belongs in the A tier. Taking up the next spot in my rankings is Roadkill. Roadkill is a very solid character in this title and has a good distribution of stats too. His special weapon fires a projectile that has some homing properties at opponents, and it does pretty good damage. Due to having higher armor than you would expect, turbo ramming into opponents is surprisingly effective as Roadkill and can do a lot of damage. The main thing that ranks Roadkill this high is just the versatility of the character. The special does good damage and is easy to use, you can reliably ram opponents for good damage, and you have pretty respectable armor, meaning you can survive much longer than some other vehicles. These factors combined are what bring Roadkill to the A tier and number 4 spot on my list. The final vehicle within the A tier and taking the number 3 spot on my list is Sweet Tooth. While his handling and speed are definitely his downsides, everything else about Sweet Tooth is pretty great. The special weapon fires a projectile in a straight line and it does a surprising amount of damage, considerably more than characters at the bottom of the list like Pit Viper and Yellow Jacket. Sweet Tooth has a great armor stat to pair with this, meaning he can dish out major damage from a distance all while having great defensive stats to prolong each trip to the health station. If his speed and handling were better, along with maybe a slight size reduction, Sweet Tooth would easily be an S tier, but as it stands, I believe the very top of A tier is an appropriate placement. Beginning the S tier and taking the number 2 spot in my rankings, we have Mr. Grimm. Grimm's first iteration as a character is certainly a great one, as he's incredibly fast and hard to hit while also being able to dish out massive amounts of damage to the opposition. The special weapon has him firing a projectile from the front of the bike in a straight line, and it does quite a lot of damage to the unfortunate soul it happens to collide with. Much like Crimson Fury, Grimm is also incredibly fast and can maneuver around enemy attacks fairly easily, meaning if you play it well, you won't be taking many hits at all. The one obvious downside is the low armor, which you can get killed extremely quickly if you aren't careful. However, once you get the character down, he's a great deal of fun to play and very strong too. These factors are what bring Mr. Grimm to the S tier and my number 2 spot on my list. Taking the number 1 spot in the S tier is Warthog, and this is for several reasons. The first of which is Warthog's imposing armor stat, allowing it to survive much more punishment than most other vehicles. This is paired with the reliable Hornet missile special attack that can output consistently good damage. That's really the main thing about Warthog, consistency. Sure, his handling and speed aren't the best in the game, but it's definitely enough to take on any challenge that comes your way. Having a substantial amount of armor, plus a reliable special weapon that dishes out good damage, makes Warthog an incredibly formidable vehicle and is enough to bring him to the top of my list at the #1 spot. And here's a look at my full list. Just to mention it again, I believe that the characters within each tier could be swapped around depending on playstyles, preferences, or just the situation you find yourself in. Please remember to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed the video. It helps a tremendous amount, only takes a few clicks, and it's free, so why not? Also, I always read all of my comments, so I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments below. Thanks again everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.